All right. Well, welcome to Wake Up to Your Life Magic. I'm so excited because we are going to be talking today to a wonderful guest, Mr. Len May. And I wanted to say up front, Wake Up to Your Life Magic. It's a podcast that's about elevating our leadership through the kinds of conversations that we have, particularly those in business. And today, Len is joining me to talk about his business. How you doing, Len?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I'm fantastic. I am on the East Coast. You're on the West Coast, I believe. Yes, LA, I think.
Yeah, LA, correct.
Yeah, you got that great LA like looking artwork behind you. It's beautiful. So tell me, and tell the audience, Len, tell us a little bit about what you do and what your company does. I am so intrigued by it. I told you that after learning about you and your work, I've been telling all my friends about it. So share a bit about what you do.
So we were the decision support platform for healthcare professionals that uses DNA, genetics, and epigenetics to guide patients to a personalized health and wellness experience. I mean, usually when you go to a doctor, they tell you, take two of these, and I always question, why two? Why not four? Why not one? So because we're all different, and that difference in our genetic predispositions that tends to guide people and healthcare professionals on what type of protocols to recommend to their patients. So that's what created our platform, and we're helping to get this precision medicine kind of off the ground. So it's not a one size fits all model anymore.
Yeah, which I think is incredible. I think something that our audience can know. I think it helps. Doesn't it help you with like knowing whether or not to give someone an opioid or not, or if they're going to be predisposed to cannabis or early onset menopause and these other sort of scenarios?
Yeah, it's all kinds of different things. So we have specific reports for different conditions, and then we look at the whole genome. But you're right about opiates. So we have healthcare professionals like orthopedic surgeons who use this to show their patients they may have an opioid dependence predisposition, and if that's the case, they modify their protocol. So instead of giving an opioid protocol, maybe they'll give them one opioid post surgery, and then put them on some like CBD or whatever else so it doesn't trigger the epigenetic response to that. And menopause, like it's not just menopause, like female hormone health. So you can see if you're predisposed to early onset menopause, like get ahead of that, or you can see if you have genetic predispositions to adverse effects associated with menopause. So somebody can be predisposed to hot flash frequency or hot flash severity, or things like even aging, early aging of the skin. So if you can know this in advance, there's things that you can do to get ahead of that. Like, I mean, when you're getting Botox and all that stuff, you're already expressing it, but you can do hormone optimization. You can do different types of treatments for that as well.
Man, we're always chasing that. The what is it? The fountain of youth, right? At some level.
It's interesting because longevity is such a huge topic now. Everybody's talking about longevity. I had an aunt just passed away last year. She was 102. The last, I would say, 15 years of her life isn't really living. You're just existing. Like you have to, the diapers have to go on. Like all that stuff. Is that really longevity? What we should be focusing on is health span instead of lifespan. Like living longer when you're sick doesn't really work. It's living longer, healthier. So as long as if you if you're living, till 86, at least you're living healthy till that 86 instead of, going through all these different conditions, diseases, and wearing diapers. Oh man, what a nightmare.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? To your point, right? I just met an 82-year-old man at the state capitol yesterday. I mean, he's so quick and he's still out here pushing, water conservation and tax systems. And you're like, so it's so variant. But, you think about it, I think we're stepping into a world, Len, it feels like to me at least, where we've already moved the average age lifespan, right, to what from like 35 or 40, 200 years ago to like now,
Yeah.
right? What you're doing makes me believe that we're going to extend that further and further and further.
Yeah, I mean that's the goal, and you're right. We've moved it from not having antibiotics and having antiquated medicine where something is going on, they'll just chop off the limb. So yes, we doubled and more than doubled our lifespan. But in the last 50 years, we haven't. So maybe a year or so is, but now with new technology and getting ahead. So the idea is people think about it's in my genes. So that's it. I'm locked in. But that's really not the case. And when we learned that, genetics works in an interesting way where, and by the way, 99.9% of us are identical. It's that 0.1% that really makes a difference. But when we're born, we get 50% of our genes from our mother, 50% from our father. And some of them, if you can imagine having like a big circuit breaker with a bunch of on off switches, some of them are in the on position. So things like our hair color, eye color, skin color. The rest of them we are in control based on lifestyle choices, whether to turn those on or off. So if we know this about ourselves, we have sort of our GPS of life. And that way we know where our potholes are in our own roads. Where is the traffic jam? So we can mitigate or avoid those and take other roads that are more aligned with us. So we're much more in control over our epigenetic expression than we think we are because we're not really locked into our DNA that way.
Yeah, it makes me so excited. First of all, because of the accountability that creates, right? Like we knew we were accountable. Now it's like, no, like watch where you're traveling. Um, but the other thing, and I actually visit this in the book, Wake Up to Your Life Magic. I have kind of the hypothesis that if we wake up to the opportunity to push through this AI technology phase in a responsible and loving way to one another, it's almost like a return to the garden, so to speak, meaning longer lifespans, and more balance between the genders, and a kind of there can be we get to decide what kind of world we're making, basically.
Yeah, I think AI is an interesting thing because you have to create guardrails for AI or else it hallucinates, which makes mistakes. And when it does that, people are taking it as fact, but it shouldn't be fact. You need to fact check AI and you need to make sure you put guardrails on there. But for data, it is the greatest invention like in the last 100 years for data because you're able to take a lot of data, and we do a lot of clinical studies and clinical trials where usually we have to create big spreadsheets and write algorithms to be able now just put it all into AI, and it does that. And because we have a patent, I'm going to read the patent because it's long and I forget what it's called. Machine learning based efficacy predictions based on genetic and biometric information. So by getting that patent, we're able to use AI and machine learning to not only disseminate data that's more aligned with the individual, but also learn from that. So, for instance, it'll say like, Dr. Smith, this is the protocol. This is the genetic predisposition. These are the blood markers. This is the recommended protocol. And Dr. Smith can say, you know what? I like to change this protocol, which is fine. And they can do that. Then that data goes to the cloud. The AI comes in and says for the next patient, well, there's 100 patients that are similar to Len that took this protocol and showed that it was working for them. So it gives them something to start with based on previous results.
That's awesome. I didn't have predictive. We were looking at IBM Watson. We were looking at some of that work around, more looking at historic, but it makes sense to me. Then you can train it and sort of do predictive models for what could happen in the future. That's awesome. So let's take a step back for a second and talk a little bit more about Len. Len, tell us a little bit about a story for you. Here you are, you own this company. You look like a regular dude, with these cool albums behind you and pics. Tell the audience a little bit about a story that maybe shifted your life or changed where you were going.
So I was the kind of kid. So I'm an immigrant. I was born in Lithuania, and which used to be part of the Soviet Union, and I immigrated here when I was about 6 years old, and I moved to Philadelphia, and with my parents and my mom's parents, my grandparents, and I would be the kind of kid that would sit in class. The teacher would call on me, and my mind would be elsewhere. So I kept daydreaming, but thinking about different things, and was really difficult to concentrate. So underachiever. I became disruptive, maybe, and I was, they took me to doctors and they diagnosed me with ADD. I didn't think we had the H back then, but ADHD, whatever. I wasn't hyperactive. So they put me on prescription medication. And that prescription medication kind of disconnected me from my sense of self. So the feeling and passion, love, hate, all that went away, and you're just going through your day and you're doing things and you're able to, I guess, focus, but there's no emotional connection. So I was going to school, and these kids I was hanging out with, they said, asked me if I want to smoke a cigarette. I was like, all right, I'll be cool. I'll smoke a cigarette with these kids. So never questioned why they had one cigarette, but they have one cigarette. So they passed it around. I got a drag of it. It didn't taste like a cigarette that I was dabbling with anyway. And I took another one. And from there, they're laughing at me. I'm like, what? And the cigarette was filled with cannabis. So
Oh,
I actually consumed cannabis. And I went back to class, and all the windows that are open in my head narrowed. So I stopped taking prescription medication, and cannabis became my medicine. I never really said anything to anybody because, you're just hanging out and smoking weed or whatever. But for me, it actually helped me to focus. It became my go to medicine. So that's my parents didn't really care for that too much. And they would catch me, I would get in trouble. And they didn't know any difference between cannabis and heroin. It was all the same category for them.
sure.
And at some point when I was just about 18, they ended up calling the cops on me and then trying to have me arrested and then literally kicking me out the door. And the irony of this story is that my parents both take products that my company has patents on for their conditions. And it came full circle. So now I have an expertise that they're proud of instead of being that quote unquote druggy kid. Oh my God, our son is lost and all that other stuff. So came back.
Yeah, wow. And you wound up helping people with ADHD as a coach, right? As a teacher.
Yeah, I went through this journey of, working on myself first, but I didn't really realize that it was medicine. And then I held a rally. I was the president of the Cannabis Action Network in the early 90s. And I held a rally at Independence Hall in Philadelphia. And my keynote speaker was this woman named Elvie Masika. And she was one of the first people to get federally prescribed cannabis under a NIDA program. I mean, most people don't know that the federal government grew cannabis in Mississippi, actually put them in these rolled cigarettes with a USDA label on it and prescribed it for people. There was, I think, 16 people that were getting it for their conditions. And so she was my keynote speaker. And after the conference, everybody crashed in my house. And we were woken up to a loud noise. And I had the sculpture in my house. She ended up walking into the sculpture and breaking it. And
Oh,
she was so apologetic and all that stuff. But she couldn't see. She has degenerative glaucoma, and she was blind until she medicated with cannabis, and she was able to see again. I mean, still had the thick glasses and all that stuff. So that sort of was a question. It works for my ADHD. It works for her glaucoma, unrelated conditions. How does this plant have all these utility, uses for different conditions? So I dove into that, a lot more to see what I can do. And then, my ex-wife at the time was like, it's time to get a real job. So I went to work for like Price Waterhouse, PwC, and then moved through a venture capital company. Then eventually I was a commercial real estate broker. And then I started really figuring out that people that I'm connected with are high level individuals. They all have symptoms of ADHD or ADD. And I decided to start coaching people and saying, reframing this. I did it for a couple of years. Basically, when you're given a diagnosis, that means that something is wrong with you. I have a disorder, ADHD, attention deficit disorder. I never thought of something wrong with me. It's just my brain works differently. We all learn differently. But when you label somebody with a disorder, your brain, your body, everything starts connecting to there's something wrong with me. So the idea was to reframe that and say, ADHD or ADD can be used as a superpower. You're able to do so many different things if you have different systems in place to be able to address that. And that's what I was doing. I was creating systems to be able to use those skill sets as a superpower. So you can multitask more effectively. You can hyper focus more effectively. as long as you know that you're producing dopamine, or there's some sort of reward system at the end of doing that that will give you that dopamine that you may be lacking. So yeah, so I did that for a few years.
So I did that, Well, what's interesting about what you're saying, there's two things that it sparks my mind, right? So one, there's so many things about weed, psilocybin, um, ketamine, all these substances, which for good reason at the time we were, feared out of. And now I think we're coming back to these ancient plants and going, you know what? Maybe Mother Nature had something in this. Maybe there was something in here that's going to reveal secrets of the universe, as I like to say, to us, right, about our own experience. And the second thought was that it's so interesting to me that those of us who tend towards some of these habits, to your point, you're in, I worked at GE for 10 years, right? There were certain patterns about the great leaders, right? That were just like, wow, they could powerhouse through stuff, hyper focus, right? All the things you're talking about. But, in other areas of their life, it might be a disaster, right? So it's true. It's almost like we all have different, it's like leaves of a tree, right? Everyone's brain has these different patterns. They're not all the same. All the leaves are not the same.
Yeah.
And some of our mental health patterns produce things that we all as a society go like, yay, good job, Len, good job, right? And others were like, that's not good. But in reality, they're neutral. They're neither
Yeah.
good nor bad. They're things to be understood, right?
Yeah, I think the other thing to keep in mind that we talk about work-life balance, and as an entrepreneur, there's no such thing. It doesn't work. If you really, we can sugarcoat anything we want, but things are going to suffer. If you are passionate and you have a focus and a mission that's bigger than yourself, and you're going to have to be a leader, some other things are going to suffer. Maybe temporarily. And maybe it's like, you're focusing a lot of your efforts here, and then you have to go back and fix the family stuff. But it's absolutely true. There's no way, as much as you try. So my goal was say, okay, if my marriage is not going to work, at least I'm going to try to be the best father that I can possibly be. And that was my goal in balance. I try to be the best that I can. I think I did a fairly decent job, but other relationships may suffer. Maybe I don't have time to hang out with my friends as much. So, you have to find what works best for you if you're going to be bigger than yourself. If your mission is bigger than yourself. If it's all about, I show up 9 to 5, my parents, they're 9 to 5 employees. They're highly educated. They went, they worked, they're retired. Now it's time for them to enjoy. They go to Florida. That's a nightmare for me. That's not the type of life that I want. But I'm not saying that that's wrong. That just doesn't align with me. I need to move forward all the time. There's something that I want to make a difference that's bigger than myself, and that's been my mission. And it's hard, when you have these thoughts in your head, they're isolating. So when you find community of different people and you start connecting with them and saying, well, that's how I feel. Well, that's how I feel too. I thought I was the only person on an island. So you find that community of like-minded people. They're also on an island. Maybe you're all stuck on an island together.
No, it's totally true. I feel so seen, right? I saw that when I stepped out of corporate. I saw that when you write your first book, and you're like,
Yeah.
whoa, okay, and I'm gonna embrace, concepts of spirituality and where we're going, and then step into politics. That's another ring, right? So I absolutely relate to that. Let me ask you, and by the way, those of you listening in, you may be in your own part of your journey, and to Len's point, there's no judgment. Everyone has their own path and seeks and is curious at their own level, and that's great. I think the point is that you want to love yourself and others, and create the mark you do at the place that you're at. Um, the place that your heart desire draws you to. Speaking of that, Len, I want to ask you about your heart's desire and the vision that you're creating. You think about the work you're doing. You have a 5-10 year vision of what you'd love to do with the work that you're pursuing. Inspire our audience a little bit with what that is.
I mean, my goal with EndoDNA was always to create the world's largest repository on efficacy. That's the goal. The goal is to be able to know what works for people, what doesn't. I'll tell you a quick story. So when we came to the US, a year after we came, my grandfather, who was a physically very large man, like not everybody in our family isn't tall. He was very tall, very large. My grandmother was small and short in stature. He had a stroke, and he lost the use of his one side, and she had to help him walk, and then he lost his speech, and he proceeded to have multiple strokes over time. And I had this vision. My grandmother and my mom would sit maybe once a month, once every few weeks, with little bags and bags of pills, and it would be on the phone with their doctor, with his doctor, talking about drug interaction. This is interacting with this
Yeah.
interacting with this causing an effect, this causing a side effect, and all these things. So, a lot of these things that happened to him were the cause of contraindications, basically. So,
Hmm.
if we can get ahead and understand and collaborate with a healthcare professional, look, we're one person. We're the most important person in our health for ourselves, but our doctor has hundreds of patients like us. So we have to have a partnership with a healthcare professional. And the idea is that I'm going to know as much about myself as possible. I'm going to go communicate and have a partnership with my doctor to say it's transparent. So you talked about accountability. We have to hold ourselves accountable to action plans and to making sure if it's important for us to be healthy, then we have to take action. Like if we're going to eat McDonald's every single day and expect ourselves to have a long health span, well, I talk to people who smoke cigarettes, and they point out, well, this person lived to be 100 and they smoked cigarettes. This person lived to be not. Yes, but they're outliers. The medicine and the research tells you that it's not good for you. And if you're going to do that and you're going to find an outlier that live longer, where you look at the other 99% that didn't. So holding yourself accountable, having a partnership with a healthcare professional, your genetic predisposition, your blood work, there's a plan. There's a plan that you have to hold yourself accountable to. Eating different things, putting different supplements in your body, doing the optimization, doing the work, and then your doctor holds you accountable, and then you hold your doctor accountable, and you can question. I have another story. I don't know if it's okay to kind of
Yeah, of
just
course,
pop
of
in my
course.
my head. So I have a friend of mine who's a very successful entrepreneur, financially successful. He has a predisposition to depressive state. So we know this because we swabbed him. We know his predisposition. So he had a deal. Something didn't go well, and he became really depressed. He went to a psychopharmacologist and got an antidepressant. He was driving in LA. He doesn't live in LA, but he was in LA with his wife and his son. And he was driving around the canyons. And he said, I had an overwhelming desire to drive off the road. He goes, it was so overwhelming that I needed to go. It was suicidal thoughts and they were taking over and I needed to go. And I pulled over and I got out of the car. And my wife came out and said, are you okay? He says, I'm not okay. And I should not be driving. So luckily he caught himself, but he went back to the psychopharmacologist and he went and got a pharmacogenomics test. So that's the test that shows you drug interaction, how drugs interact with your body. And the drug that he was on was red, and he shouldn't have been on that drug. And the main side effect of that drug is suicidal thoughts. But taking a step further, he also has a genetic predisposition for treatment resistant depression. So most of these drugs wouldn't have worked for him, but he still would have got the side effects. And guess what? There's medication for the side effects. And once you start doing that, you're on this hamster wheel of chasing, taking medications, and you end up like my grandfather with garbage bags full of pills. And that's what we want to avoid. And look, I have nothing against pharmaceutical medicine. There's plenty of amazing drugs, surgeries that were life changing and saving. But you talked about plant medicine. A lot of these medications come from plants. The cure for cancer may be in the Amazon right now. But what we do is we take these plants that we have receptors for in our bodies and we synthesize them to make a drug. Cannabis, great example. So there is over 400 components in the plant. The pharmaceutical industry is like, holy shit, what do we do? We synthesize individual molecules and they tried. They made THC, which is the active ingredient that gives you a euphoric high feeling. they synthesized that and created pills like Marinol. And for that, it was sedative, but it didn't have that enzyme that actually creates ghrelin production and makes us hungry. So they were using it for AIDS patients in the 80s to get them an appetite. And it wasn't working for them. But people like Brownie Mary would come into the hospitals with brownies, with hash brownies, and that would work. So these are the kind of things, we have to join forces together and not have one against the other. You can use plant medicine in conjunction with other medicine, but you use it as preventative medicine. Get ahead of the issue. Instead of saying, you know what, my elbow hurts. Oh, your elbow hurts. I have something for you, a shot or a pill. Maybe the question is, why does my elbow hurt? I wasn't playing tennis. I don't have tennis elbow. I didn't bang it anywhere. Maybe it's inflammation. Well, how is it? Well, maybe it has to do with cortisol release and stress. Have you been under a lot of stress lately? Yeah. Well, I also don't produce an enzyme that breaks down anandamide much quicker than the average person, which means that my cortisol level can stay longer in my bloodstream. And what happens? Overactive immune response. So now we have these inflammation in our joints. And because we're so in the Western world pain averse, we ask our doctor, give me something to kill the pain. Well, the pain may be an indicator. So just follow it like they do in traditional Chinese medicine, other medicine. So that's my soapbox moment.
Yeah, no, I love it. So two thoughts, right, that you brought up that are really important that I just want to highlight again is one, when you're talking about this pursuit of your health, right? A long life's journey, I realized that's a self-love thing, right? Some of us take the time and go, you know what? I love myself enough. I'm not ashamed that I want to feel good. But for some people, that act in and of itself is shameful. How can you be putting yourself over your kids? A mom might say, right? Listen, you're the dad. You need to just plow through it, right? I don't know how many men, especially, will just ignore their health because they kind of think that's the manly thing to do. When in reality, you're not going to be able to serve your family as long because you will be bedridden, right? Or you will be not here. The second thing you're pointing to, and I think it's fascinating to me because we're talking about the produced medicine, nature's medicine, and I think that I always think of it as this third triangle is your mind, your mindset, right? How much I've seen. I actually had the situation of one of my daughters having some pretty severe mental issues, and it was like, let's go to, drugs, and you're like, wow, this is way out there, right? Let's pull back and look at some other ways of addressing this. And mindset, breakthrough, we don't talk about transformational breakthrough. We believe so many lies about who we are that we don't address, that kind of we skirt, right? We're so used to avoiding an issue about ourselves. We don't even see them. Sometimes we need another human to be the mirror for us. And I talk a lot about breaking those boxes down in my book. And I know you've done some personal coaching as well.
Yeah,
So I'm
and
sure.
I agree with you about mindset. I mean, I've been a big pursuer of personal development since I was a kid. I would be the kind of kid that sit in my room and read the encyclopedia and read the different types of books, and I would be reading like a Tony Robbins book on the beach, and people are like, "What are you reading this garbage for?" and all that stuff. But I think the more you fill your vessel, the better you are. And you brought up a good point about yourself and sacrifice. It's my parents used to tell me, "Oh, we sacrifice this and this and this." But it's like that whole, on the plane when the mask comes down, you put on yourself first, so you can get it, and then you help the people. If you can't fill your own cup, you're going to be depleted. There's nothing left for you to give. You have to take care of you, so you have enough left over to take care of everyone else. And we have these pursuits, we have these goals. We want to achieve this, we want to do that. But when we're sick, we have one single goal, is to get better. All that goes away. So we have to focus on that ourselves. And personal development and mindset is key. That's the first step. If you believe it, now you can take action. But if you don't believe it, then it's hard for you to take action. I just did a Joe Dispenza retreat, and the power of meditation and the power of mantra and the power of belief, and you can measure that within your neurochemistry. And you brought up a good point about your mindset. Well, going back to genetics, when you have your genetic predispositions, the epigenetic expression you control, there's several different things that control the epigenetic expression. Number one is your lifestyle choices. So the food, the nutrients that you put in your body. The second thing is your exposure to pesticides and heavy metals, all these different things that are out there. And the third one is your own neurochemistry. So the neurochemicals that you release can actually trigger the expression, the epigenetic expression of your genetic predispositions. So you have to look at all three for health and wellness, not just one.
Perfect. So, with that, I'm going to ask you, as you think about leadership, and I say that generally as a general category. Obviously, you are doing corporate leadership, right? In that you have a business, you're not a huge corporation yet, but you got a business, and business leadership. There's this element of what makes us very human, and part of my book, I am asking people to reconsider the amount that they awaken to a spiritual sense of self, a purpose, a connection to whatever their sense of the divine is, or their sense of purpose that extends beyond just what we see, but also it honors what our ancestors did to get us here, right? And where we're going. And I'm curious about how things that are spiritual, or things that are not about just what we see, have impacted your leadership in business.
I think meditation is the biggest thing. So I have a very hard time calming my brain. Part of it is ADD, part of it is just the way I am. So, I tried meditation many, many times. And the one that really stuck with me is more TM, transcendental meditation. So doing that mantra, even though I don't do the 20 minutes twice a day as often as I should, when I do, it feels amazing. The other thing that I think is really important to understand is reframing in at least in my world. And I did this in corporate when I used to run like huge teams. I always had these expectations, and I'm always very hard on myself. But the shift of I work for you. So nobody who works with you is going to have most likely the same purpose and passion as you. You own it, you have it. And even maybe your business partners don't, because you were the initial catalyst for this. But I reframe things like working in teams, putting people in where their skill sets are, and then putting them in a position of leadership within the company that you work for them. So I'll give you an example. I'm not the marketing guy. I'm not great at it. I know where my limitations are. I can, but there's people that are much better than me. I may be the sciencey guy. So when we are doing marketing, the person who is in charge, I work for them. What do you need from me in order for you to be successful? Because if you give people autonomy and empower them with their strengths, they own that part of the company and you work for them. Maybe it's not still going to be the same passion, but you collaborate with them instead of having this hierarchical, your boss, you do what I say. No, no, no. I work for you because your success equals my success equals everybody else's success. So reframing that and having that sense of, I don't know, empathy. It's not defined in corporate structures, but we're all human beings, right? So we all have other things that are going on in our lives besides our work, and having empathy for the human connection. I believe that when you have these experiences, and I work with a lot of interns, so and I personally try to work with a lot of interns from different schools that come out, and that connection, because and they told me this before, they interned before, and it's challenging because you have this hierarchy, you have to get me coffee and all that stuff. I try to treat them just as like I want them to feel what it's going to be like to be a leader in their space, and I empower them. Sometimes they have projects where the CEO of the company, that's me, I work for them. They tell me what to do, and I think that collaboration lends for everybody to grow in the company and allows the company to grow.
Yeah, I think I appreciate I actually do have a daily wealth manifestation practice with a teacher. I do morning and evening, and I love it. But it for me, it had to include breakthrough, right, as part of the practice because I really love the continuous learning. Right, to your point, you're going through a new thing, right? And you're going through an aging parent, or you're going through a job loss, or you're going through like whatever it is. Those are going to come along. And I will say as well, you're right about the passions, figuring out what someone's passion, what their spiritual bent is, what they're living for, right, helps you as a leader to sort of connect them to how they're going to contribute best. Is something I found in my work as well. All right. So Len, I would like to know point of vulnerability, right? So we always look great, right? Well, your business is awesome and it is smashing. But in the wake of reality, what's something you struggle with in your job? What's something that our audience can hear about that's like just, the reality of life that's not always peachy?
I mean, running a business is always up and down. COVID was a big eye opener for us. So I made a mistake, and I've made many mistakes. It just owning those mistakes and correcting them when they happen. So my mistake was that before COVID started, I signed a bunch of deals with companies that do conferences. So they would sell
Yes.
their branded tests at different conferences. Like thousands of people show up, they do these different things, they resell them. So when COVID hit, I was
No longer.
stuck. Like all these contracts that I signed, they're like, "What do you want us to do?" Well, you're responsible for selling 1,000 kits a month. And like, we can't even sell 100 because our business changed. So you have to scramble. And sometimes what happens is when you're in these scenarios where you have expectations, things that go right, which is going to happen. It's what do you do about that? The action you take. And I see a lot of people that take the ostrich approach. They take their head, they put in the sand. It's going to fix itself. It's never going to fix itself. You have to take massive action. And as painful as it is, and it happens all the time, you have to take massive action. So that massive action can mean I have to let people go. As painful as it is, even people that were close to me, I hired people that were friends even, and they don't speak to me to this day because I had to let them go, and they thought it was a personal thing, but it's business. You have to do some of those things. Change the business nature of the business that we're only going to focus on B2B instead of direct to consumer so we can scale quicker and have one customer as a doctor is able to sell 250 kits or patients instead of selling one kit at a time. So making these difficult decisions, you have to peel the band-aid off and be out there. It's when you're an entrepreneur, and especially when you're a owner or a C-suite person, sometimes you're alone and you're alone in making these decisions, even if you have partners. But because you're also first and you're innovative, sometimes you're stuck in the silence. So, your audience may know Wayne Gretzky was the greatest goal scorer. I mean, he got passed by Ovechkin, but he's the greatest points getter in professional hockey. And I remember they asked him in an interview, he said, "How do you score all these goals?" And he said, "I skate where the puck is going to be." So if you are an innovator, sometimes you're skating anticipating where the puck is going to go at some point, and you're on an island and you're waiting for a while, and you're maybe alone, but you have to be able to embrace that because the puck is going to come to you, and you're going to score that goal, and you're going to be the first one. You're going to be ahead of everybody, but it's sometimes a lonely place to be.
Len, I feel like, are you talking to, like, I feel like this is a personal dialogue for me, coaching me. And I say that just because, you have to kind of like build your own little bridge to a little place where you're like, hey, I think we're going to need this, right? We think this is going to be helpful. And it is lonely. And it's lonely, but also, I don't know, for some reason, I call this the comfort of our ancestors. I feel like so many others, like you, are doing this. You're a future ancestor, right? There are so many people throughout history that have made that leap to go, I think it's going to go here. And they got to go build that thing and suffer through the challenges and the wins, the whatever. But that's how we progressed. That's how humanity got so far. And in that isolation, I think our spirits grow and they
Yeah.
mature.
Look, there's a certain pain to growth, right? So you can be stagnant, and there's a lot of companies, and they do fine. They're staying in one place, and they have steady, steady Eddie kind of thing. But if you want to really grow, it's painful, and you have to get past that pain. It's like going to the gym, working out your muscle. Yeah, you're going to be sore, but muscle is going to get bigger, and you're going to grow. So it's the same kind of thing. You have to be honest with yourself, and that looking in the mirror, having that conversation with yourself, having that personal self-talk, and saying,
Yeah.
it's real. I fucked up today. I made a mistake. I'm going to own it, but I'm going to, and I'm going to cry about it today. I'm going to give myself 24 hours to cry, to call myself name, but I'm going to pick myself up, and I'm going to treat myself like my own best friend. I would never talk to my best friend this way. I would never make them linger in it,
Right.
suffer in it. I'm going to get myself up in 24 hours, and I'm going to say, I'm going to take action to change it. And this is, I think, the biggest differentiator between people who lead and people who feel comfortable not being in the, because it's uncomfortable, and you have to own that discomfort. No.
It's true. It's true. And the reality is, whether you know it or not, you're the leader. like you can try to abdicate leadership, and all it means is that you suffer more in many ways, right? Because the decisions you don't make, someone else is making for you. At the end of the day, someone else in the world is happy to make the decisions for you, and you're not going to be in control of your ship. One last piece of advice, Len, that you might have for someone that's like, hey, you know what? I learned this the hard way. I'd love you to know this.
The best piece of advice that I can give is not the one that I received, and I'll tell you what that it would be as a CEO. But this too shall pass. This is the thing that I want everybody to understand. If you think I'm 53, if I look back at myself at 23, 53 was light years away. Holy shit. And I was, oh my God, what I'm going to do at 23? I had this happen to me. That will pass. It will pass. So if you focus, yes, you have a bump in the road, it's going to go away, and you're going to come out the other side. But don't sit there lingering. I lost a lot of friends through the years to overdose, to taking their own lives, and all the things they were suffering with. Looking back, they would have passed as well. Just give yourself a chance, seek therapy, seek whatever it is that can, help you with your personal development, but don't linger in it. That is something that I would really love to tell myself as well, and remind myself as well as everybody else.
No, that's great. That's great advice. And that's something that we can always reflect on. And I know it's just like it's the concept of manifesting, right? The concept of us creating the future world that we want is very real. Right? You just have to be willing to go through the challenges where you're like, wait, what's going on? And I'll end this by saying that, I wrote Wake Up to Your Life Magic because this concept, that we are creating the world that we want, literally together. It's not just you and me, right? It's us together. And I think about people today who are thrown off by a lot of fear, division. And it's at the end of the day, it's much more powerful to wake up and realize that, wait a second, we're all in this together. What if we all thought towards the same direction? What if we pursued things that made the world better and realized we still have the opportunity in this generation to make it a better world for our children?
Yeah.
And that's an important realization to wake up to, because we manifest alone and together.
Absolutely. And this whole thing with manifesting, people, I live in LA, so I mean, it's pretty common, but you go out some of the places, even in Philly outside, oh, you're doing a woo kind of stuff. I'm like, well, there's science, like if you're sciencey people, you can go and follow the science. It's very, very well documented, well studied. There's frequency. Frequency have vibration. Vibrations are high, they're low, they're attractive and magnetic. Like if you don't believe in manifesting because it's woo woo, then go and read the science behind it because that science exists. So that's
Yeah.
what I would suggest.
Oddly enough, I have an assessment that measures your frequency in 12 business areas that I use with clients. So I believe that wholeheartedly, but I also believe in just the practicality of it, right? Like basically, you're never going to get the world you never planned on. Right? You're never going to have the marriage you never hoped for. You're never going to have the job you never dreamed of, right? You have to start with the vision. And we as humans have that amazing capacity to create what we think. It may not be exactly right, but generally speaking, like you created it.
Yeah.
And that's it's so practically empowering. It's just I don't know, maybe it is at 48 that I realized like, no, this is true. I
Yeah.
created that
You
stuff.
have to see it though. And that's why I think people put a lot of pressure on themselves to have this purpose. I have to have a sense of purpose. I have to have a sense of purpose. I think that sometimes the purpose will manifest itself, it'll appear, or you just go through those things and say, not it, that wasn't it. At least you tried it. You don't have to put that much pressure on yourself. And really, it's that personal belief and vision. You have to see it, and it doesn't have to be permanent. You see this, you did this, great. Now visualize something else for yourself. But I completely agree with you that having the clarity of purpose is the biggest driver. Every single neurochemical in your body is aligned to make that what you see happen. So when you see it, you feel it, you can manifest it, and everything is working in your favor to do so. And if you're connecting with like minded people that are vibrating in that frequency, you're amplifying that for everybody. I just experienced it, like I said, at Joe Dispenza, but it can be with your friends, your colleagues, your loved ones, whoever that they are.
Absolutely. And man, I just want to made me think of, I was talking once to an elder, and she said it was like in my mid 40s, and she was like, people kind of often will crystallize in their 40s and finally find a purpose. So like, you never know when it's going to be, and then there's a purpose and it shifts. It's another one and it's beautiful, and we're figuring it out. And part of that's the joy. So thank you so much, Len, for joining me on this podcast today. For those of you who are listening, you can find out more about the book and the podcast at www.wakeuptoyourlifemagic.com. Len, where can they find out more about you?
EndoDNA.com is our website. I'm all on all the social, Len May, or on Instagram, Len May DNA. I have a podcast called Everything is Personal. You can find that wherever you listen to podcasts. And I also have a book called Making Cannabis Personal. You get that at Amazon or wherever you get books.
All right. Thanks so much, Len. I hope you all had a great time listening in, and we'll talk soon. Cheers.
Thank you.